A while ago, I gave 3 regular Kirby enemies possible new copy abilities. Just like last time, we picked 3 more iconic foes and turned them into unique skills. Videos like this wouldn't be possible without our gifted artist, who provides the channel with the best artwork on YouTube. So leave a kind comment for her and I don't know, take the chance to roast me, killing 2 Bronto birds with 1 stone. Kirby's Dream Land is not only the very first title in the series, but introduction to some of the most recognizable opponents we still see today. It's not a proper Kirby game without some Waddle Dees, Gordos, and especially a swarm of Bronto birds. Just like Waddle Dees, they come in any shape or size, adjusting to the game's theming, gimmick, and tone. In Dreamland, Bronto's main purpose is to hinder the player from simply flying above every obstacle and skipping large sections of a level, but over the years his main role revolved around becoming the go-to regular enemy in the air. Everyone bumped into them a few times, and Bronto birds are basically the annoying Zubats you find in caves of Kirby. Aside from situational gimmicks like taking off when holding them in Kirby 64, you will find rarely any noteworthy traits Kirby could make use of. However, one specific behavior all of Bronto's variations have in common is their tendency to appear in swarms. Swarm Kirby makes use of this distinct characteristic and surrounds himself with a bunch of tiny swarmlets, ready to fight and defend. Bronto Bird was one of the most requested copy abilities in the last video, but in contrast to enemies like Happy or Bouncy, there isn't a clear new ability you can immediately draw when looking at a Bronto Bird. Ignoring obvious inspirations such as Wing or Beetle Kirby, I never try to enforce an idea onto a regular enemy if there's no potential, and only include them in a video on the assumption of an actual appealing concept. Swarm Kirby is such a case, and one of the few abilities focusing on aerial movement. Kirby gains the power to surround himself with what we like to call swarmlets, tiny Kirby-like creatures encircling their leader. It's unclear where they come from or what they are, but it's strongly implied they sense kindness in the soul and are drawn to Kirby's joyful spirit. Design-wise, Swarm Kirby follows the traces of similar swarm abilities like Ukulele's transformation, Pikmin, the Wonderful 101, and to some extent even Mass Attack. Since it is a power-up highly flexible when soaring through the sky, there has to be a soft spot balancing the strengths. The running speed is slightly decreased when walking on the ground, encouraging players to stay above. No one likes to play with Wing Kirby on foot, and the player would get a similar natural incentive to exploit Swarm's organic benefits. When standing on the ground, all the swarmlets start to rest on Kirby, and idle animations include forming them into a crown, highlighting their loyalty. Copy abilities are not only about their utility in battle, but can serve a visual, slightly comedic purpose as well. This is also why Stone Kirby always transforms into different models, and Swarm Kirby would be one of those cases, intriguing to look at. Consequently, the offensive mechanics revolve around Kirby's little army. By tapping the attack button, Kirby sends out 1 or more swarmlets flying forward in a homing dive. This can be used multiple times in succession, but the little helpers need a second to return, preventing the player from spamming. Some of the swarmlets can even stick on the enemy and deal consistent damage, comparable to a Pikmin, which is especially useful for mini-bosses. The charge attack makes swarmlets orbit around Kirby quickly before flying out in a spiral, particularly useful for crowd control. Foot combat on the other hand is as expedient as you would imagine, with a quick swarm strike to guard Kirby at least to some extent. Shielding covers Kirby with all the swarmlets he has, but the more damage the player takes, the weaker the shield becomes. Most attacks are built around aerial dominance, while grounded Kirby is noticeably vulnerable. To give Swarm a little extra touch, there's a special growth mechanic making use of the amount of swarmlets surrounding Kirby. He can collect more swarmlets by attacking and absorbing other Bronto birds, making Kirby stronger. Since Bronto birds are one of the most common enemies appearing in every second level, this mechanic retains a certain balance. Without becoming overpowered, Kirby gains the chance to become stronger whenever he encounters Bronto birds, but has to stay cautious to hold his newly gained strength. A direct hit leads to losing some swarmlets like pearls in Epic Yarn, but there's a default amount of helpers always sticking to Kirby's side. The potential for puzzles allows for traditional riddles such as hitting far-off switches, carrying small key items mid-air, or trigger multiple mechanisms in sequence with precise aiming. 2D gameplay gives Swarm Kirby a very traceable orientation, while 3D areas allow for a more action-packed creative combat feature. Similar to Bronto Bird, Kabu is one of those enemies every fan is familiar with, and just like most classic minions, appears in all sorts of variations to stay relevant. Despite a limited character design, he's able to slide around, fade in and out, and release multiple Kabus in case of a big Kabu. While being a mere enemy within regular Kirby games, the only somewhat noteworthy moment of this character took place place in the animated series, where he played an essential role in guiding the main characters. Giving the simplistic approach, it's only natural to receive no copy ability, but especially Big Carbo left food for thought. His fortress tower inspired shape paired with the stationary ability to summon multiple small Carbos is the breeding ground for Castle Kirby. Kirby channels the power of a small fortress and attacks by lobbing small Carbo-shaped stones forward. It's not about diving into the action directly, but fighting from a distance, making Castle Kirby a defensive summoner-style ability, with a heavy focus on area control, similar to Artist from Star Allies. It concentrates on staying in place, defending ground and summoning indirect means for the offensive. Kirby's idle stance would be stiff and braced, like he's ready to take a hit at any time. As I mentioned in the last video with Mushroom Kirby, copy abilities can not only change the way Kirby plays and looks, but his whole demeanor according to the corresponding power-up he copies, reflecting the ability not only in design but radiance as well, is something the main series rather lacks, and we like to incorporate slight behavioral shifts whenever we can. Charging the attack button creates a bigger Carbo, sturdier and more resilient for regular opponents. To quickly escape the situation, Castle Kirby can dash with a fast spinning sprint, echoing a moving, twisting Carbo. The up attack lets Kirby grow his helmet into a tower, perfect for aerial foes that cannot be reached by sending out statues. When shielding, Kirby covers himself with his helmet, looking like a normal fortress and receiving no damage at all, unlike regular shielding, which only lowers the amount of damage Kirby takes in certain moments. So far, I haven't made use of those weird press down, up and B attacks, so by performing this specific button combinations, Castle Kirby spits out a big stationary Carbo, shooting stones without manual controlling it. Using this technique, players can create fortress zones around Kirby by strategically placing turrets around the area. Unlike most copy abilities that are all about movement, Castle Kirby is about setting up space and turning the field into a stronghold. It's a rare tactical ability, almost like a tower defense minigame within a platformer. And as one last special nod to dedicated fans following the series outside the medium of video games, Castle Kirby can charge and shoot little warp stars from his mouth, directly mirroring Carbo's role of sending the star in the animation show. I can imagine Castle Kirby wouldn't be a particularly popular ability once the novelty wears off, and because people prefer snappy, fast-paced movement in their platformers, it could be ignored on repeating playthroughs. Still, it would find its niche in possible spin-offs such as Kirby Fighters or puzzle-focused challenges, like the Star Roads in the Forgotten Land. Now for something that isn't particularly creative, but all the more cathartic and almost necessary for long-term fans of the series. The Meta Knights are a group of subordinates, who first appeared in Kirby's Adventure and are kinda forgotten in time. The more Meta Knight turned into a friendly rival over the series, the less necessity there was to feature antagonistic minions. Today you find related regular enemies based on the Meta Knights in normal levels, but one feature they all have in common are the inability to grant any skills. Despite swinging striking weapons ideal for fitting copy abilities, none of them were ever used for such a wasted opportunity. I could have picked any of them for this video, but Maze Knight always stood out to me thanks to his giant prominent iron ball. I cannot be the only one who was hopefully inhaling him as a child, only to be disappointed by the lack of any skill. Kirby wielding a heavy flail is a captivating contrast to his otherwise cuddly presence, and balances the appealing depiction of an endearing protagonist, holding a rather violent power. It's the reason why Kirby and the super abilities from Return to Dreamland look cool, and probably also why everyone wanted Maze Knight to give Kirby a power-up. Maze Kirby wears a purple metal helmet with sharp angular petals resembling Maze Knight's crown or flail spikes. His mighty iron ball is the morning star of the show and resembles a familiar enemy from the Mario universe. Kirby was never shy to directly reference other IPs or related Nintendo franchises, and although it's rare, we wanted to take the chance to give the admittedly plain visual of a Kirby simply holding an iron ball the necessary stroke to make it Kirby. However, Maze Kirby is obviously not about fashion and centers around the combat mechanics. Flail Toss describes the action of throwing the ball forward, similar to a heavy version of Cutter. It deals damage on hit but also takes a moment to retract. The hitbox on the ball is naturally the strongest, while the chain itself only pushes enemies away with a weaker impact. Most importantly, it wouldn't be satisfying Maze ability without the option to actually swing the weapon. So by holding the attack button, Kirby tornadoes the ball around him, knocking nearby opponents away and ending in a longer directional swing when releasing. At the same time, the player can also slowly walk around while swinging, and pressing shield leads to a quick quick cancel, in order to not annoy anyone who just wants to swing without always throwing the ball as well. The long swing in particular can be used like a grappling hook by hitting walls or other platforms. Making the most utility out of limited actions gives players depth, and Mace Kirby the flexibility he needs for such an offensive skill. The downbeat technique is called anchor spin, where Kirby plants his feet into the ground, turns into the flail itself and spins widely around himself. It's a much wider and stronger hitbox, however the feet are still vulnerable to attacks, and he cannot move in this form. It's the kind of comedic, creative twist to an ability you come to expect from memorable Nintendo games, and just another option for a fast defensive trick. With the dash attack, Kirby tears with the ball in his hands through enemies, and as you have probably already guessed, can break those grey blocks only a limited amount of copy abilities can destroy. Up B turns Kirby into the flail again and launches him upwards. When hitting the ceiling, a wall or a platform, he can bite himself into that extended position and with the control stick, vibrate the lengthened chain to hit nearby aerial foes. Releasing the button swings Kirby to the place he was holding on, and even though there would be only rare occasions to make proper use of a combination such as this, it would feel all the more rewarding when it works. I tried my best to make Mace Kirby as flexible, creative and advantageous as possible to match the modern standard of incredibly fluent copy abilities in 2D. It's a powerful skill similar to Hammer, but you need to commit to every attack and it's more deliberate than Sword or Fighter for instance. All of my proposals could also work in 3D, but it's much harder to explain and imagine. The main benefit in three-dimensional space lies within the opportunity to focus even more on the combat utility and making use of the space the third dimension allows. One of the Forgotten End's minor flaws was the comparably lackluster implementation of copy abilities in comparison to their 2D counterparts. But once the gameplay and especially combat is more fleshed out, power-ups like Mace Kirby will definitely become a fan favorite. There are even a couple enemies to pull the ability from. Besides obvious candidates like Mace Knight himself, there are also the aforementioned variations we see from time to time, and Masha could constitute as a fitting mini-boss holding the skill. It's always somewhat gratifying when a new ability can give retrospectively old and especially lost enemies a new purpose. And I feel like it's not about if Mace Kirby can happen, but actually when we're going to experience it.